There are things in our life that we just didn't know how important and useful it is until we tried it. And once you use it, you may wonder why you didn't start using it earlier. So camera slider is one of those things. And since I started using a camera slider, I use it pretty much every day for my YouTube channel, photography, and it is now one of the most important camera accessory that I just can't live without it. Cepon has just released a new camera slider, and in my opinion, it is one of the best slider in the market. So let's check it out in this video. Kia ora, good morning everyone, Richard Wong here. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we will have a look at the new Cepon Micro 3 slider. But a quick disclaimer before we start. I'm an ambassador for Cepon, so while I will try to do this video in a similar way as my usual reviews, I won't really call this a review. But I will still share with you my honest thoughts, including the pros and cons I found about this slider. The Micro 3 is the latest slider from Cepon. There are 3 different lengths, and just like the Micro 2, there's also a manual version and motorized version available for each of the lengths. The shortest one is the one that I'm holding here right now. There is a motorized version E500 and a manual version M500. The 2 versions are basically the same apart from one that comes with the motor module and then one without. If you buy the manual version M500, you could just add the motor module later on and it will become the motorized version. Compared to the Micro 2 Plus, the Micro 3 500 slider is about 1 to 2 inches longer, but it is still a pretty compact slider that you can fit inside a lot of camera bag very easily. The travel distance is 59 cm or about 23 inches. Then we have the next size up, which is the M500 and E500, that is a little bit longer and the travel distance is 77 cm or about 30 inches. And then we have this big Micro 3 1000 model, which is the biggest in this series, and the travel distance is about 107 cm or about 42 inches. Apart from the length, the design of these sliders are almost identical. Pretty much the whole slider is made of metal, so it's a very solid slider. The tracks are now 45 degrees, and Cepon has upgraded the support wheels to stainless steel, so it should be a lot more stable and durable as well. The top half of the slider has the matte black finish and the bottom half has metallic finish. Combining that with the more angular design, the Micro 3 is a very nice looking slider and it looks a lot more premium than the Micro 2 Plus. The maximum payload when using the slider in horizontal direction is 12 kg. If you need to tilt the slider or set it up vertically, then the maximum payload is 4.5 kg for the Micro 3 500 and 4 kg for the Micro 3 700 and 1000 sliders. As I mentioned before, you could buy the manual version slider and add the motor module and turn it into the motorized slider, which is something you could also do with the Micro 2 Plus as well. But if you compare the Micro 3 with the Micro 2 Plus, there are 2 big improvements. The first big improvement is that installing or uninstalling the motor is super easy, very inconvenient. Just place the motor module on top of the area rosette mount on the slider, turn the little wheels on both sides clockwise a few times, and that's it. Your manual slider is now a motorized slider. It takes less than 5 seconds. And the best thing is, I don't even need any tools or carry any additional parts if I want to do that. To uninstall the motor is just as quick. So this is a huge improvement compared to the Micro 2 Plus, as that will take you easily a minute or more than that. The other improvement is that the motor module for the Micro 3 500, 700 and 1000 sliders are all the same. So if you need a short and a long slider, you can just buy a M500 and a M1000 slider, and then you can share the same motor between them. I want to mention one more thing, is that the slider comes with a very nice carry case that you can fit the slider and all the accessories in it. If you also buy the motor module or you buy the motorized version slider, then there will be a separate carry case for the motor module. The motor carry case also has a space for you to put a NPF style battery in it, which I thought is a very nice touch. By the way, the motor can be powered by NPF style battery as you expected, but it can also be powered by a 5V 2A USB power source. Okay, let's talk about how to set up the slider. It is actually pretty straightforward, but I want to mention a few things that you should be aware of if you want to get the best results. The first time you took the slider out from the box or the carry case, remember you need to remove the 2 screws at the bottom of the slider. These 2 screws were used to lock the position of the slider to prevent it from getting damaged during shipping. You can keep the screws and the little spacer in case you need to ship your slider to somewhere else in the future, but for normal transportation, there is a lock on the slider which allows you to lock the slider in any position. The Micro Free slider can be used either as a desktop slider or mounted on a tripod. If you want to use it as a desktop slider, just unfold the legs. The legs are much longer than the one on the Micro 2, which make the slider a lot more stable and really shouldn't tip over even when you fully extend the slider, which was a problem I found with the original Micro 2. If you are placing the slider on a place that is not completely flat, you can adjust the angle of the rubber feet at the end of each leg. If you want to use the slider on a tripod, set up your tripod first and make sure the tripod is level. That is very important if you want the slider to be steady. Then mount the slider onto the tripod. Just use the screw hole at the center of the slider. For me, I use a Cepon Revolver quick release and I just need to click it onto the tripod, so very easy. If you use the small 500 slider, that's pretty much all you need to do. But because the slider only uses a single attachment point to your tripod, so the weight of the camera could introduce a bit of tilt when the slider is fully extended. This is usually not a problem with the small 500 slider, but if you are using the longer 700 or 1000 slider, the tilt could be quite noticeable. Because of that, all the Micro Free sliders come with 2 supporting rods, and the slider has 2 additional mounting points at each end of the slider. So you just need to screw one end of the supporting rod onto the slider and then clamp the other end onto your tripod. That will make the slider a lot more stable, especially if you want to put a heavy camera onto the slider. If you want the most stable setup, you could use 2 tripods instead and attach a tripod to each end of the slider, and the slider would then be absolutely stable with no tilt or any unwanted movement at all. But I think for 99% of use cases, a single tripod with or without the supporting rod is good enough, and then you don't have to carry an additional tripod. But anyway, it's good to have the different setup options for different use cases. Another thing I want to mention is that with the longer Micro 2 sliders, there is one extra setup step that you need to do to make sure the slider wouldn't suddenly tilt when it extends past a certain length. With the Micro Free, because of its completely new track design, you don't have to do that part anymore, which not only means one less step to set up, but more importantly, just reduce the chance of something not set up correctly. Then the last thing you need to do is attach the camera onto the slider. The Micro Free has a much bigger camera attachment base compared to their previous slider. It helps make the camera more stable, especially when you have a heavier camera setup. For me, I just use another Cepon Revolver quick release as I just love that quick release, and that just make it super quick and easy for me to attach or remove the camera from the slider. The camera screw on the slider can support either 1/4 or 3/8 inch without having to use any additional adapter, which is fantastic. The screw also has a retractable design, so when you finish using the slider, you can just push it back into the slider to avoid scratching your other camera gear when you are transporting the slider. It's a tiny little feature, but very user and camera friendly. One thing I really like about the Cepon motorized slider is that there are physical buttons on the slider, so I could just control the slider using those buttons. It's not very fancy, to be honest. It doesn't have a touch screen or any kind of display on the slider, but it is enough for my requirements. So after you power on the slider, you can just press and hold one of the two direction buttons to move the slider, or you can double click and the slider will continue to move until it reaches the end. Just like the Micro 2 Plus, there are 3 different speed options available: slow, medium and fast. Tap the power button, you can toggle between the 3 different speeds. I did some measurements of the travel speed using the E500 and I found something pretty interesting. At the fast setting, the time it takes the slider to travel from one end to the another end is about 11 seconds. At medium speed, it takes about 15 seconds, and at slow speed, it takes 31 seconds. The total travel distance of the E500 is 59 centimeters, so that means the average speed at fast setting is 5.3 centimeters per second, medium speed is 3.9 centimeters per second, and slow speed is 1.9 centimeters per second. I said interesting because it is quite a bit faster than the Micro 2 Plus, which is 3.5 centimeters per second at fast setting, 2.3 centimeters per second at medium, and 0.75 centimeters at slow setting. So Micro 3's medium speed is already a little bit faster than Micro 2 Plus fastest speed, and Micro 3's fast speed is approximately 50% faster than Micro 2's fast speed. I think a lot of people will certainly love Micro 3's faster speed. The downside is that the Micro 3's motor is a little bit louder than the Micro 2 Plus at the same speed setting. I won't call the Micro 3 noisy, but compared it with the Micro 2 Plus, which is really quiet, the Micro 3's motor noise is definitely more noticeable, especially at the medium and fast setting. The other downside, at least for me, is that even at the slow setting, the travel speed is not that slow anymore. From my calculation, it is about 250% the speed of the Micro 2 Plus at the slow setting. The difference is quite noticeable, and I found the slow speed is a little bit too fast for the product shots that I shoot regularly. You could also set up A/B pon by double pressing the power button with the slider at different position. Then double press the power button after you set the A/B pon will make the slider move between the A/B pon once. If you want the slider to go between A/B pon non-stop, you can do that too by just press the left arrow and the power button at the same time. Another new feature that comes with the Micro 3 is that you can set up A/B pon by manually moving the slider using your hand. Just press and hold the double arrow button for a second, and then you can now move the slider manually and set the A/B pon this way. However, because the motor is still physically attached to the slider, you need to apply quite a bit of force to move the slider manually, so I think for myself, I will just stick to using the left and right button as I find it is a little bit faster. I remember when I first used the manual Micro 2 slider, I was really impressed by how smooth and how fluid that slider is. I always struggle to create smooth and consistent camera movement with most manual slider, but this was not a problem at all with the ZPON Micro 2. And this time with the Micro 3, it is the same. Well, or better actually. You can get very stable, non-jerky movement very easily with the Micro 3. There is also a dial on the slider for you to adjust the friction, so you can fine-tune it to exactly what you want. It is very useful if you have to shoot in some extreme weather condition. For example, if you are shooting in a very cold place, the friction would increase. So you can use the dial to adjust and compensate that. Another way to use this adjustment is that if you set up the manual slider in an angle and just rely on gravity to move your camera, you can adjust the friction to change the speed how fast the camera moves. If you use the motorized version, it is also very smooth. I've used quite a few different motorized slider, and this motorized Micro 3 is definitely one of the smoothest slider that I have ever used. Even when I use it with the Laowa 24mm probe lens, which is a very challenging lens to use with a slider because of its long barrel at the front, which really magnify any tiny amount of vibration, but I can still get very smooth footage when I shoot it with the Micro 3. For me, I usually just use the physical buttons on the Cepon slider to control it, but the Cepon Lab app, which is available for Android and iOS, provides some additional more advanced features. While using the buttons on the slider allow you to set up AB point, 2 waypoints, you can set up to 6 waypoints in total using the app. And remember, I mentioned the slow speed with the Micro 3 is still a little bit too fast when I shoot some product videos. I could make it go much slower using the app. And there are just so much more you can do with the app, like set up time-lapse or stop-motion sequence or panorama shot. You could also combine the slider with Cepon's Pons PT system, which is a pan or pan and tilt head, and you can create some free-access camera movement. If you're interested in finding out a bit more about the Cepon Pons PT, the pan and tilt head, I've made a video about it, so remember to check it out after watching this video. I will put a link down below in the video description. The app detects and connects the slider very quickly, but I have to be honest and tell you there are still limitations and a few issues I found with the Cepon Lab app when I'm working on this video, especially when use it together with the Pons PT system. But I noticed Cepon has made quite a few improvements and bug fixes over the last few months already. And if you're wondering when the Cepon follow focus is coming, I've been asking Cepon the same questions many times too, and I was told that they are definitely working on it and it just takes some time, but hopefully it will be available quite soon. So remember to subscribe to this channel if you're interested in it, as I will definitely share with you the news about the follow focus as soon as it is ready. I remember when Cepon told me that they were working on the new Micro 3 slider, I was quite surprised because I thought the Micro 2 Plus is already a very nice slider, so not too sure why they are working on a new slider already, and more importantly, what changes could they do to it. And when they show me the renders of the Micro 3, I thought, well, it is a very nice looking slider, but it's not until I received the slider then I realized how beautiful the Micro 3 slider is. The Micro 2 Plus is already a nice looking slider, but when I put the Micro 3 next to it, it makes the Micro 2 Plus looks like something that was created by a design student. The more sophisticated design, 45-degree angle track, the matte black and metallic finish, all together just give the Micro 3 a more serious and more professional look, and I honestly think it is the most beautiful slider that I've ever seen. But it's not just about the look. The Micro 3 is also a huge step up as a slider. Setting up the slider is a lot faster and easier, but at the same time it also offers more adjustable options for users to adapt it better for their specific use case. One thing I really like is that installing and uninstalling the motor module is now so much easier. With the Micro 2 or 2 Plus, I really rarely convert the slider between the manual and motorized version because it requires me to bring some tools and I need to swap out some parts, and the whole process just takes a bit of time and effort. So sometimes even I do want to use the Micro 2 Plus as a manual slider, I just can't be bothered to do that. But with the Micro 3, it literally just takes a few seconds to do that, and I don't need to bring any tools or extra parts, so I can see myself doing that very often in the future. The speed of the motorized slider is also quite a bit faster, so I'm sure that will make a lot of users happy. Having said that, not sure if I'm the minority, but I do wish the slow speed setting could be a bit slower because I quite often use the slow setting for my product shots and I prefer the speed to be a little bit slower. I've discussed this with Cepon and suggest maybe consider allowing users to define their preferred low, medium and high speed setting in the future. They said they will definitely look into that. I think the only major downside of the Micro 3 is that it is quite a bit more expensive compared to the Micro 2 Plus. The cheapest Micro 3 is the manual 500 slider, and that is $399 US. The motorized 500 is $599, and the most expensive one is the motorized 1000, which is $739. So it's roughly $100 to $150 more expensive than the similar, maybe slightly smaller Micro 2 slider. If you have a tight budget, Sepon is still selling the Micro 2 Plus, and it is still a really nice slider. But if you ask me, I would recommend you to save up and get the Micro 3 instead. The Micro 3 is definitely the best slider Sepon has ever created, and probably one of the best slider in the market as well.